If you had one piece of advice for someone looking to get into their home, what would you say to them?
One piece of advice would be don't wait. It's best to get in sooner rather than later and figure it out along the way when you're in your own home rather than waiting to get into your own home and then never get into the finish line.
All right, Mario. How do you say your last name?
Papotto.
God, there's a lot of P's in that name. Is that Italian?
Yeah, it is.
Ah,
It is.
do you speak Italian?
I am the furthest thing from Italian from a speaking perspective.
Ah, all right. I won't break out my broken Italian then.
Half Aussie, so I'm the most Aussie Italian you'll probably meet.
So for the listeners, just give a bit of background about. Obviously, you work for us. What do you do for us? Go for it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the consultants here down in Vic.
Yep.
Basically assisting clients, through their journey of getting out of the rental market and trying to find their path into their own first home. Sometimes we get people looking for, second, third homes, but what we do is we try and, create a simplified process. It's a very overwhelming process of, getting into a home to start with, but then everything else that comes with it, it can be very daunting, and that's sort of what kicks people away. So our job is just to try and ease them into that process and help look after that through every part of the journey.
Yeah, ideally try and make it simple, easy, and hopefully as fun as possible for people.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes people forget about that because it's stressful. Like it's something you've never done before. It's more zeros than you've ever dealt with in your life, and it's like Chicken Little. I've got no idea what's going on, but the sky's definitely falling.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things we try and do in that is bring some of the fun back to it. It should be exciting. It's your first home. It's a massive achievement. You should be smiling along the way as you go through it.
Definitely. I think with everything, like where there's that fear, there's also that excitement element too.
Yeah.
So it's a very natural sort of thing to have. So especially when it's such a big life decision of buying a home, naturally you're going to have the questions pop up. You're going to have the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other, and go, what's the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Should I just continue, going on holidays and enjoying life, or should I go this way? So I guess it's very natural, and that's why I think it's really important having people in your corner that are helping push you towards the right decision, but not forcing that right decision. It's, I guess, like you mentioned, that emotional support so they feel themselves that they can make that right judgment call for themselves.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a tango, right? Where sometimes people want to jump off a cliff. Sometimes they need a bit of a push to get there. So it's this tango between pushing you to what you actually want and trying to get you over the fear, but at the same time you can't push too hard because that just makes it worse.
Oh, exactly.
I think people talk about the reactions that we get when we're under threat or under pressure, and people often talk about fight or flight, and that's true. Like a lot of times people are fight or flight, but the biggest thing I think that we see is people. It's not fight or flight so much; it's just freeze. So people get overwhelmed and they end up doing nothing. But probably the biggest problem that we come across is that people do nothing until they're like 45, and all of a sudden there's a fire underneath them, and they realize if I don't do it right this very second, it's literally never going to happen.
Yeah.
And I know someone said this to me the other day, or maybe I said it doesn't really matter, but I often think about this in business, which is the scariest thing that I've ever done in my life. Is that fear and excitement are indistinguishable. They feel like exactly the same thing. Yeah. So quite often when I feel fear building up inside of me, I say that to myself, fear and excitement are the same thing. And it changes my point of view where I'm like, this is exciting. I'm just, I'm a little bit scared. And if it wasn't scary, it wouldn't be so much fun.
Exactly. I think like even from that perspective, like you've come from that sporting background, being an athlete as well. Like I played a lot of sport growing up, tennis, football, and I think it's always, they call it that white line fever, where you can be completely shitting yourself in the change rooms before a game.
Yeah.
Going, oh, what if I make a mistake? What if I do something wrong and I'm going to get dropped next week? And as soon as you cross that line, you've still got that same feeling in your gut.
Yeah.
But it all of a sudden becomes that excitement and you just start playing freely. And even with tennis, it's mental game. That fear is the excitement of, winning that next point.
Yeah.
Just taking it one step at a time and doing those sorts of things. So they come in tandem. And I think that's where people need to have that slight push to go, it's the same thing. You're making a good decision. Just you need to start feeling it on that side, not so much.
Yeah, the excitement side rather than the fear side. And tennis, very topical. Australian Open on here at the moment.
Yeah.
But this is why you've got a coach, right? And I remember when I was doing sport, you'd have a lot of guys who would start self-coaching. They'd drop their coach. And I remember the coach I was working with, he said, that's all good. But the problem is when you self-coach, you don't know when your coach is being an idiot. Yeah, the other thing that brought up for me, it brought back some emotions. I remember before every single race, like I would have butterflies in my stomach. I'd feel unwell to the point where I wouldn't want to do it. I'm like, why do I do this? It's so stressful. I hate it. And I remember one of my coaches pulling me up. And there were two things. So one is it's your body's way of preparing. And the other thing that he said to me was he said, it's good you feel that emotion because if you didn't feel it, it would mean that you didn't care. And what he said to me was the second I stopped feeling it, like I get to start lines nonchalant, that was when it was time to retire because it was over. I didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, mate, really good point. The fear is you want it. Yep. But you just got to reframe it as excitement.
Yeah. No, exactly.
So something I really wanted to talk to you about today because I thought it'd be very useful is you have gone through a really similar process to what our clients go through in buying your own home. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's I guess it's a bit of a backstory. I've always been interested in property, always wanted to get into the market since I was younger. Straight out of school, not the plan,
Where did that come from, do you think? It's definitely got to have come from the Italian father or mother.
Well, I think my parents always owned their home.
Yeah.
Grandparents always owned their home. Not so much like investments and so forth, but that was my direction initially. Like very much wanted to build this portfolio. I wanted a massive portfolio and do all the amazing things that everyone wants to dream of. And I guess straight out of school, my biggest plan was, I want to save up. I want to travel Europe. That was always the goal. Just travel Europe. Didn't care. Money gone, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look back on it and I go, geez, if I'd used that money to buy a property back then, like it would be a completely different ball game. Property back then was cheap. So did that, then came back, was sort of trying to find my way, working, but the property goal was always there. And it was probably like 2016, still living at home, saving money. And I went, no, now's the time. I'm going to put my head down, start putting all this money aside. So I ran a really strict schedule, like in terms of whatever my pay was, I put everything out first. And the small difference that was left in there, that was my play money.
Mm-hmm.
So saved up, put enough towards a deposit, and then...
Can I ask you a question on that? When you were... So I was actually talking about this with Matt in another podcast, and it was this principle around how you pay yourself first. So when I got serious about money, the one principle that I learned that's really stuck with me is what most people do is they get their pay in, they pay all of their bills, they do everything they need to do, and then anything that's left over, they save that. But the issue is, obviously, you get lifestyle creep. You earn a little bit more. You have a little bit of a better life. But that will never, ever stop, right? So what did you do in saving money? How did you make saving money a priority?
Well, I guess that comes back to probably growing up. Like it was always for me, it was always, if I wanted something, you've got to sort of put some work towards it. Like we got, as kids growing up, we got given a lot of things. It was good. My dad worked his ass off. But at the same time, it was never, you're just going to get given everything. So even playing tennis as a kid, it was, you know, if you want a really nice racket, if you want a new racket or the new shoes, go do some work, save up money, and you can buy it. So it was almost that work for reward. As I was getting older and I wanted to still start focusing on property, that's where the priority became, no, if I want to really get serious about this, I need to start going, okay, I want a lifestyle because I'm still at an age and young enough to go, I still want to party, I still want to go out, still want to do all those things. But I've also got the priority of that long-term goal. So when my pay came in, I set a specific budget. It was $500 a week, straight into savings. Whatever was left covered the minor bills. Again, I was still living at home. So it's not like I had mortgages, rent, all that at that point in time. So I felt comfortable enough to go, all right, $500 a week out. I've still got a little bit of play money and then maybe some other money for personal bills. And I did that at the same time. You know, I thought if I'm going to really get serious about this, I was working full time. I went, I need extra money. So I started doing a bit of tennis coaching. One of my mates' dads had a warehouse doing, you know, newspaper, magazine, you know, transport and so forth. So picked up a couple of shifts here and there with him. And it was all just about how can I get as much money as soon as possible to get myself in the market. It was just, it's like they say, like you got to sacrifice something to make an addition to something. And I was actually listening to a podcast between Stephen Bartlett and Chris Williamson in the last couple of days. And they were talking about how come the end of the year, everyone's got these New Year's resolutions. And every time they get to the end of the year, they're like, I'm going to do this, this, this. And it's always about the mindset of adding, but there's never the discussion with themselves about what do I need to subtract in order to add that to my life. So yeah, for me, it was the sacrifice of, okay, if I'm going to work more, I'm going to have less time to do other things. But the addition is more money into savings to get to a point of having another deposit.
Yep.
So yeah, that was really 2016 in a nutshell. It was just head down, start working. And that was it. Still partying, still having fun, but there was limitations. It was very strict. So come sort of end of 2016, early 2017, one of my sisters worked at the bank. I used to speak a fair bit with her and she was like, let's just see what you can do. So she ran some numbers and she goes, look, this is what you can probably afford. So at the time, I drove out to Clyde back then. It was just vacant land everywhere. And I went into the sales office and they were like, you know, if you pay $10,000 now, you've got this block of land. It was 500 square meters. It was $200,000.
Wow. 200 grand for a 500 square meter block in Clyde.
200 grand.
Yeah.
So I went, oh, and this is where the fear and excitement kicked in. So I went, look, I'm not going to make a decision today with the sales office. It's a lot of money in my eyes to just palm off for a block of land in this place that back then to me was in the middle of nowhere. I was like, I've never been out this far before. I grew up in, you know, McKinnon or, you know, furthest was sort of Parkdale I lived. So I was like, this is so far out for me. I would rather be close to my family or close to home.
Yep.
And it was so many decisions flowing through my mind. I was like, I can't make a decision. And it was just that fear had stopped me at that point in time. So I sort of kept going, kept trying, just looking. It was almost like becoming a process of just scrolling through real estate, but then not making any decision.
Yeah.
And over time, it was a few months went by. I'm scrolling through real estate. I'm noticing prices are going up. I'm now putting myself in a worse position. I'm getting myself further and further away. Yeah. So at the time, ran some numbers for myself individually, and I went, it's not looking possible anymore. I either need to make more money or find a solution. So
So you found that over that period that you were procrastinating and
Yeah.
window shopping and yeah, just
Yeah,
basically doing
just
mental backflips, that the properties you were looking at got out of your price range.
correct. Yeah, and that
What
was probably
what period of time would that? Sorry to cut you off.
that's right. It was like end of 2016, going into sort of 2017.
So over 6
Over
months or a year.
Not even.
Yeah.
Probably like 4 months.
Yeah, right.
So over 4 months, I went, all right, I was at this point here and I could have made a decision. And for whatever reason, I didn't. And I didn't get myself in. I mean, we look at Clyde now, 500 square meter block. One, it pretty much doesn't exist. And two, if it does, you're paying a significant amount of money to get onto it. So I look at those scenarios and I go, that's not regrets, lessons now. But at the time, I was like, I've just spent 4 months procrastinating and now I can't get myself in. I've just wasted 4 months, essentially. So obviously one of my sisters was working at the bank. But again, when it came to mortgage, I'm very much like, I don't want to involve family in everything in my life. I don't want them seeing everything. So went to a mortgage broker as well, got an indication of what we needed to do. And he goes, you this is your options. You either can't afford anything or you buy a tiny little studio apartment, or you need to find a solution, make more money. That's that. I didn't have many expenses at the time, so that looked good credit score. And then my eldest sister wanted to buy an investment property. This was probably a year and a half later. We were talking. I went, yeah, like my goal is an investment. So let's have a look at that. So we started sort of speaking to brokers and agents and looking around, looking at different locations. We looked at Noble Park, things that were sort of still within proximity of the city and, those good suburbs. And it just wasn't becoming a reality. We put a deposit down on a place in Noble Park, finance fell through. And it was just this snowball effect of things. And then eventually it was almost like, again, that attitude in sport, just never give up. I'm going to find a solution. It's going to work out. I've always had the mindset, even when this shit is hitting the fan, it's going to work out. Something will come through. So it was all about continue working, continue saving. In the midst of that, I decided, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to Europe again. Me and my mate bought tickets. We went away for 6 weeks. We had the money to do it. So we were like, yeah, let's go. When I come back, it's head down. That's it. Again, sacrifice, head down, get into a property. And then I started looking around Tasmania, of all places. And that's where having the conversations with people, everyone's like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Like even like little towns. Like I was looking around a town called Georgetown in Tasmania.
Yeah.
So it's just about half hour away from Launceston. It's not blue chip location. Like it's just whatever. But I started looking and I was researching it for a while. And then me and my sister went, I think this might be a good little hotspot. So we found a broker, got everything organized, and we found a house, 1,000 square meters. It was $163,000.
Yep, right.
And it was already rented out to someone, been there for like 10 years. We went, that's the one. So we bought it. At the time, my sister couldn't go on the mortgage or anything like that. So we had to structure things in a certain way. So it's just me on the title and so forth. So even that comes with its challenges because you've then got to write up these personal agreements and so forth. But we got ourselves in, and that was the catalyst. That's what really took me from there to then being able to make decisions later on. So I was finally in the property market. I didn't care where it was. I'm in a town called Georgetown in Tasmania. No one that I spoke to knew anything about it. They had no idea. They're like, what the hell are you doing? And even like, the closest people to me is like, why would you buy there? Why would you even think about that? It's a stupid decision.
Yep.
And then literally a couple of years later, we're now in COVID. And so this was actually March 2019, bought that. Then me and my partner moved in together. We were actually renting out of my sister's house, the one that I bought the property with, renting there. And then we started, she fell pregnant with my son. And we went, no, let's start looking. We want to, find another place. We're looking at rentals. We're having the discussions. It was COVID, so we're stuck at home. You can't go out. You can't party. You can't blow your money. So, we're doing the right things anyway. And then literally 2020 came along and we started looking at property quite seriously. We're driving around everywhere. I've always been the investor mindset. She's always been, you don't rent, you own, and you live in your house.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a real battle for a few months trying to, get her mindset potentially around just buying another property and renting it out and, sacrificing that and renting somewhere. In the end, when you're trying to compromise with your partner, you naturally go with the partner's decision anyway. So we just compromised. It was like, no, all right, we're having our child. Let's find something. Let's create our home.
Yeah.
Stop renting it, because even it got to the point in our discussions, I was like, you're making some really valid points. Like, we have a little child running around or crawling around. If you're in a rental, you've got less freedom. So
you found that was the real catalyst for you was your son. Was he born yet, or he was coming?
No, he was coming. So
Yeah.
he was a little seed, like, just found out he's pregnant. We're pregnant, and it's just like, right, we're now approaching that stage of our lives.
Yeah, and I find that happens with a lot of our clients. So if you have a look at the data of who our clients are, it is generally speaking, not always, but generally couples who've either just had kids or they're just about to have kids. And then we've got like 25% of single professionals is what it tends to be. And I think what happens with people when they're about to have a family, they realize all the insecurity that comes with renting, where, rents can go up, you can get kicked out, you don't own it. I think people can survive that for themselves. But as soon as you've got a kid on the way or you're thinking about having a family, all of a sudden you've got another person that you've got to take responsibility for. And the thought of having them living that unstable life is not acceptable. So that, for a lot of clients, is the catalyst to get them to get over that fear to get into a property.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, and I think that's where, my level of compromise had to sort of sway that way too, because whilst I would have loved to have, the investment property and keep doing that process, I think it was important to start stabilizing that and having a real home for our family. So once we established that, it was more about, all right, well, where do we want to live as a family? Like, where can we find ourselves that home? So my partner's originally from Adelaide.
Yep.
So she lived in Melbourne for a few years up until that point. I've always lived in Melbourne. So trying to, again, navigate that, what's a good area? She's not really tied to a particular part of Melbourne, whereas I am. I brought up in the southeast. So for me, it was like, I would love to stay right here. If I'm going to buy and own and live in a home, I want to stay right here. So again, it was then, all right, let's go through the motions. I've done this process before. So, all right, let's speak to the broker I feel comfortable with speaking to. Let's go have a look at, the locations of the properties. And we very quickly found out where we originally wanted to be, we could not afford. It just was not going to work. So again, that sacrifice versus reward scenario, we needed to go, all right, this is our budget. Our broker said, this is our budget. I also had a car loan at that time and we had a bit of savings and so forth. But again, the sacrifice was, all right, for us to get to here, we need to, one, sell this car. Well, I need to sell the car, not my partner. I need to sell this car. So that is off my record. It's the one thing that is limiting us from buying at, 700 compared to 550.
Yeah. And how much? Do you remember how much the repayments were on that car?
Yeah, I was paying just under 700 a month.
Yeah, and that was affecting your borrowing capacity by 200,000.
It was just over just over 150,000 or something like that. So something
Yeah.
ridiculous. We were working the numbers. The broker was like, we're going to work the numbers based on the proviso that that car is going to be sold and that loan's gone.
Yep.
So throughout the whole process, it wasn't a matter of waiting till that car was sold to then start that finance process. It was, all right, this is the numbers if you can do that. And if you don't, this is what you're looking at. So go start looking at things at this price point, and you need to start the process of selling this car. Yeah. At the time, it was just a car. It was a nice car, new car, whatever. But I also had a work car, so I wasn't even using it. So it was just one of those things. It was good when I didn't have a work car, but then I didn't actually need it. So whilst I would have loved to have, you know, an additional car around the house and, you know, little toys here and there, it was just, all right, I just need to get rid of it. I actually have no attachment to this thing. It's just going to stop me from doing, or stop us from doing what we want to do, which is getting into a decent property. And then we were looking around, you know, Endeavour Hills, those types of areas. Didn't like the houses, they were all old. So then we started venturing out to that Cranbourne area. Again, you know, years before that, I was looking at Cranbourne going, that is in the middle of nowhere. And I guess the best example of that, we were driving out to an inspection in Botanic Ridge at the time, and that was affordable. This is 2020. That was, you know, 600 grand for a brand new house. But we were driving out there, and we're like, I feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere. All the roads are just farmland. You're driving through all these big trees, and all of a sudden you hit this little estate. You're like, what the hell? So we started looking at that, and that was where we had to open our eyes and go, we can't afford what we actually want right now.
Yep.
We can't afford that. That's potentially something we'll look at down the track in the future. What we can afford is here. I need to sell this car. I'm going to sell the car, put that money towards a loan, but we need to start looking at Cranbourne. And then all of a sudden, the lockdowns really hit. So we could no longer actually go out and view properties in person. So we started doing like virtual inspections and so forth. So eventually, cut a long story short, we ended up buying in Cranbourne off a virtual inspection. Didn't even see the property, but felt we had a really good trust in the agent we were dealing with. And that to me was where it was important. I spoke to a number of agents and I just did not trust the conversations I was having with them or the guidance they were giving. And I've had shit experiences with brokers as well, but finding the right person through my processes was, all right, in this one, I'm getting the right advice that I need right now. With the agent, it was the same thing. I've got a really good agent here. He's helping me, and this house looks really good. So we ended up buying, and that was the sacrifice. Moving out to Cranbourne. Even in saying that, we still had people going, like I had a sister living in Clyde North at the time, but it was still for us, oh, why are you moving all the way out there? It's an hour from the city or an hour and 20 minutes from the city. Or what about getting to work? It's going to hit traffic on the Monash, and that's ridiculous. So
how did you get over that hump? Because I mean, to begin with, you were thinking you wanted to live where you'd grown up and where your family were. So how did you mentally get over that hump to buy in a suburb where you could afford?
To be honest, like I'm very realistic or logical. Like my nonna and my grandparents live in Elsternwick or lived in Elsternwick, and you can't afford there as much as they will. If you sit down at their house and say, "Oh, you should buy around the corner here." Well, sorry, nonna, I don't have $1.5 million. Like that's sort of the conversations. It's more logical for me. It's like I'm not going to go through that process I first went through when I started looking initially, where I'm going to waste 5 months and procrastinate and then go, shit, we can't even afford Cranbourne now.
Yeah.
So I think having gone through that experience so early on, like, you know, 5, 6 years prior, it was more going, why would I do that again? I saw exactly what happened when I did that.
Yeah.
Within a matter of a few months, I couldn't get into something. So now we're in a position where we can actually do something. This is what we need to do now to get into the market again with our own home. And then, you know, down the line, we'll eventually probably move out of this home, might sell it or rent it out.
Yeah.
And right now that property is rented out as an investment property, and we're renting in the western suburbs.
Yeah.
Again, sacrifice. one of my previous jobs, office moved to Werribee. I was not going to be sitting there driving 2.5 hours to Werribee and back every day. So that was another conversation with my partner. Babe, we're going to have to move to the west. We're going to have to rent.
Mm.
And then that was a really tough conversation. She did not want to rent. She did not want to move. But it's actually been the best thing we've done, because where we are now, we're in a real good hub in the western suburbs of Melbourne where there's a lot of development going on. I see a lot of our clients buying close by. And now I'm looking at where we are and going, this is where we need to buy.
Mm.
We're gonna buy here. We've got more options here than in Cranbourne.
Yeah.
But it's that now being in the position where we can have those discussions saying, this is where we're going to do it.
Do you find you get that from clients where clients are going, I don't want to live in that area, but that's the only thing that's affordable for them?
Yeah, every single conversation. And I guess it's no fault of their own. Like, it's just natural. I think when you've grown up in, say, one location your whole life, particularly first-home buyers that might be younger and they're still living at home, or they've just moved out into a rental for the first time in their life and they've been at a rental for a year.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I want to move out or buy a house with my now boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever it might be. It's like, it's very natural for them to go, no, this is where we want to live. We're not looking anywhere else. And I've had to have those discussions with people sometimes. And that's where I sort of touch on my own personal experience with them as well. It's, look, I understand exactly where you're at. I've been through it myself. And what I've seen in my own experience is, if you wait too long, you can very quickly get priced out. Or you just make a small sacrifice now, go to where you can afford, so that in a few years' time, you are in a position where you can potentially move back to where you want to be.
Yeah.
In 5 years' time, you might have a different job or a few promotions. You've got more income. There's equity in that house now that you can utilize. But if you sit there only focusing on where you want to be and you wait 5 years, you're going to end up living in Bendigo or back ends of Bendigo on a small block of land for your price point. So
for people who haven't heard that term or don't understand it, what's equity?
So equity is essentially the value of your property less the mortgage. And when the banks calculate the equity, they'll calculate an 80% cap on that. So if the value of your property is $1 million, they'll say 800,000. If your mortgage is $500,000 left, it means you've essentially got $300,000 of usable equity.
Yep.
So you might have 500,000 of equity in your home, but you've got 300,000 of usable equity in this example, and you can then use that money and go and purchase another property.
Yeah.
Or depending on your financial situation, serviceability at that point in time, you can be very strategic. There's people that go and put a third of that equity towards a deposit of one property and a third towards another one, and they start branching off. But I think, like we touch on in our foundations program in the book, when we're sitting down with clients, the first home is the scariest one. It's the hardest one to get into. Once you're in that first home, the sky's the limit, really.
Yeah.
So that's where you can start making some serious decisions about what you want to do moving forward.
Yeah. So this is, as you said, it's a conversation that we have with almost every client, where what you want and what you can afford are almost always two very different things. But what I often relate it to cars. So when people are buying their first car, like your dream car might be, I don't know, a Lambo, for example's sake. But most people understand that your first car isn't going to be a Lambo. It's going to be a Hyundai Getz or whatever it is. You need to start small, and then over time you can build up to what you want. And people get that with cars because they're like, well, I need a car. But when it comes to houses, people don't think about it like that. They're just like, oh, I'll just go and rent a house, which is the same as saying, no, I'm just going to go and hire a car. But when you're hiring a car, you realize that's a waste of money and you're never going to be able to build up. And what you're talking about with using one property to then buy the next property, that's exactly my property journey. So, my first house that I ever bought was an investment property in Adelaide. Same thing, did it sight unseen. I've still, to this day, never gone through that house. I've only ever seen pictures of it. But what I was able to do was to use the equity in that property. So I had to save up the cash to get into the first one. And then I used the equity from the first one to buy my next property. I think I bought 2 properties anyway. It's kind of irrelevant. And then I used the equity from those to then be able to buy my principal place of residence that I live in, where if I had to save up the money for the deposit and the cost for that principal place of residence, I'd never be able to do it. And whilst it's probably not my dream home or forever home, it's pretty close to it. It's a bit of a dream home. But because I didn't have to save the money, I utilized the equity from the properties. I was able to do that quite easily. And people can do that with their homes as well, whether you're doing it as investment or you're doing it as owner-occupier home. I think the important point is you need to meet the market where you're at. Because if you're holding out to try and get into your dream property as your first property, the reality is that may very well never ever happen. And the reason it's never going to happen is let's say your borrowing capacity is 800,000, for example's sake, and your dream property is 1.5 million. And you're like, well, I can save my way to the deposit and costs that I need for that $1.5 million property. The issue is that's going to take you 5-10 years to do. And at that 10-year point, your $1.5 million dream property it's now worth $3 million bucks. So you've got to double how much you had to save for it. And it's like this greasy pole that you can never climb up. So I often liken the property market to an escalator, which it is always going up. And when you're not on that escalator, everything seems out of reach. But the thing is, once you get onto the property escalator, if properties go up in value and you own one, great, your property's going up in value. And it kind of changes everything. But the big hurdle that we're seeing people need to overcome is just being realistic about what you can afford now. And yeah, you talk about our program, like the first step in it is affordability. And the reason it's affordability is for exactly that. You've got to work out what you can afford and buy what's within your price range. Because the reality for a lot of people is if you don't buy now, you may never be able to buy in the future. So it's kind of one of two things is going to happen if you don't purchase now. The best case scenario, and this is the best case, not the worst case, is you will pay more money for a smaller block of land which is in a suburb that is even further away than what you're looking at now. And that's the best case. The worst case scenario for people is you will never be able to buy a property. People go, oh, that's a bit doom and gloom. Have a look around you. Have a look at the property market. Have a look at property prices. You look at that new grant that the government's brought out, the Help to Buy, which is amazing. For the first time in the whole time I've been in this industry, the government is finally doing something about servicing. Because, everything's been focused on deposits, first homeowners grant, that's amazing. Your LMI waiver scheme, also incredible. But if you haven't got the income to service for the cheapest properties on the market, you're never going to have it. And the Help to Buy scheme helps with that, and it's incredible. But what you will find, so same as with the first home buyers grant. So I'll use Queensland as an example here, just because it's the one I've got in my head. Yeah. When we were in Queensland, properties were, you could buy Park Ridge for, say, $450,000. The first home buyers grant got doubled to 30 grand in Queensland, so big incentive, and the price cap on it was 750,000. And what you saw was it seemed like overnight, minimum chips for a property went up to 750,000. So now what you've got is you've got this Help to Buy scheme where the government will take an equity stake. So if it's $1 million property, just for example's sake, because it makes my maths easy, the government will take a 40% stake in the property, which means you only need to service for a $600,000 loan and you can buy $1 million property.
Yep.
Amazing. However, and this is what people forget, so if we look at Victoria, for example, the price cap on that grant is $950,000. So that's the most expensive property you can buy. Now, you watch property prices in Melbourne over the next year, maybe year and a half. It may be shorter. If you look at Queensland, it's already happening. The minimum chips for a property is going to go up to $950,000 before you can say who's Albanese. Like, it will happen so quickly. So my point is, if you hold off, the chances of you never being able to buy anything are real. And I was talking about this on another podcast the other day, that there's a whole generation of people where a huge percentage, I'm making numbers up now, but like, I am just making numbers up. I'm wanting to say 50%, but whatever the percentage is, a huge number of that generation may live as lifelong renters, which is fucking terrifying. I shouldn't be swearing, but it's genuinely terrifying.
Yeah. Well, even with that, like if you look at how the rental market is, rent is only going to keep going up as well. So I think part of our conversations as well, whilst it's also about being realistic on, what can you afford, where can you afford to actually live right now, I think it's important that when we are having these conversations with our clients, we are bringing up the rents, because some people get worried about, the mortgage repayments. They go, I'm paying $650 a week now. But then all of a sudden, if I have a mortgage, I'm going to be paying $900.
Yeah.
So it's about trying to bring them back down to earth a little bit and going, well, I understand that, but your rent is only going to keep going up. That $650 today, when they do that review next year, that's probably going to go up to $680 and then $720 and then $780, whatever it might be. Like some of the rents, in the last couple of years went up by $100 a week out of nowhere on some people, which is crazy. So when we talk about that, it's about, all right, well, $900 a week for mortgage repayments, the likelihood of that potentially going down is, reasonable. But your house is increasing in value. So it goes back to the equity conversation as well. So you've got something that's your own. You can make decisions on that property yourself. It's going to grow in value. You're not going to potentially get kicked out in 6 months or a year. So I think having those is really important, because one is location, and people have the wrong perception of location. If I told people where I live, they're going to go, oh, that's miles out. That's miles out. Even Matt was saying it when I first moved out there. Oh, wow, that's quite far. It's only half an hour to the city. It's actually closer to the city than where I was in Cranbourne. So I'm like, actually, it's pretty reasonable. And the way they're building these hubs, these estates, these communities, they're building them in a way so it is, you don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
You've got all your schools. You've got good schools in these communities. You've got sporting facilities. You've got, amenities. You've got shops. Right in the middle of my estate, there's, Coles, there's restaurants, there's a few little shops. There's a doctor's clinic. You've got everything you need in there. So you actually don't need to be branching out anywhere. And then all of a sudden, the people that tell you, oh, that's so far away, by the time they're ready to potentially get into something, they're going, oh, I have to move even further than you now.
Yeah. So I remember when I was, 18, 20 or something like that, and I was looking at houses, and Point Cook, which was the end of the earth back then, and Point Cook, you were buying like a four bedroom, 2 bathroom, double lock up garage for something like $170,000. And I was looking at those houses and comparing them to what I'd be renting in, Elwood or something similar to that. And I remember going into work and going, this is crazy. I'm going to buy one of these. And, Betty from the barbecue said, you're not living there. And I listened to Betty and I never bought them. But imagine if I had bought a $170,000 property in Point Cook, which was the ends of the earth at the time. What it'd be worth
it's $1
now.
$1 million now.
Yeah. Hey, the other thing that I wanted to talk about here that you brought up before, which was a really good point, was around repayments. So there's quite a lot in this that I want to unpack. So the first thing is people compare rent to repayments. And they're like, oh my God, it's so expensive. First things first, quite often it's only, 100, 200 a week difference. So it's not that much different. and it's very easy to make lifestyle changes so you can afford it. But more to the point is this. When you pay rent, 100% of that money is dead money. You're literally paying off someone else's mortgage. So, if your rent is 35 grand a year, you pay rent for 10 years, it's 350 grand, half a house that you paid off for your landlord. That's the first thing. The next thing is when you are making repayments on a home loan, part of the repayment is interest. And interest, I agree with you, is dead money. So, give it to the bank, it's gone. It's very similar to rent. Yep. But part of that payment is principal. Yep. So principal, you pay down your loan. So that's still your money. It's just tied up in the house. So it's almost like a forced savings plan. So when you compare interest repayments to rent payments, interest is quite often lower. And then you've got your savings plan on top of that. So for most people, like let's say you're paying 650, well, that almost sounded like a swear word. Let's say you're paying $650 a week rent, and then you're saving $300 a week in savings. So you're putting away $950 a week already. It's kind of the same thing with the house as well. But, and this is the most important point, is when you buy a property, if your mortgage is $700,000 or $800,000, whatever it is set at that mark for the next 30 years. So it doesn't go up and down. Yes, interest rates can go up and down, and that will affect your payments, but the amount that you're paying off
reduces.
It goes down, but your repayments are set at whatever that percentage is for 30 years. With rents keep going up. So you go 30 years down the track, if rents are going up 4 or 5%, which they have done historically for the past 30 or 40 years, so that means your rents will double. Let me do some quick maths in my head here. Your rents are doubling roughly every 15 years or so. So if you're paying, what did we say? $650?
$650.
So $650 in 15 years, $1,300. In 30 years, $2,600. But assuming interest rates didn't change, your repayments on your mortgage would still be $950 or whatever you set.
Yep.
And that's what people don't get over time. Yep. So when you work out the economics of buying your own house compared to renting, it's so much better. And at 30 years, you're paying zero. You're just paying for the upkeep of the home. Where if you lock yourself into renting, you are renting for life. And the thing is, when you're 30 or 40 years old, it's hard to go forward. But again, that thing that I was saying before, like imagine trying to make the rent at 70. Yeah. Imagine trying to make the rent when you're on a pension. So I think when you're looking at the economics of buying a home, if you look at it logically, it makes sense. But people need to project forward, past today. And it's like, where are you going to be in the future if you don't do it? And that would be
that emotional they need to have that emotional attachment to it.
Oh, that's the other thing as well. So, you can talk numbers till you're blue in the face, but nothing can bottle up that feeling when you walk into a joint when you first bought and you're like, holy Jesus, they gave me a home.
Yeah.
Like if they
did it.
Yeah. If they knew who I was, there's no way they would have given me a home.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing. It's like a lot of people, they don't know that they can do it. We show them a way that they can. They finally do it. It's like, wow. How did I go from this? Or that's when they'll start going, why was I stressing so much?
Yeah.
Or why did Auntie Jan at the Christmas do say not to do something or whatever it might be? Like the closest people that will say all the negative things, they'll start coming out of the bushes. Oh, well done. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah. After the fact, the exact same people who were warning you off it all of a sudden are telling you what a legend you are.
Biggest supporters, and they're going, you've done the best thing ever. You're going to, wait for a few years, and all of a sudden they become your financial advisor as well. And but it's fascinating. But I think it's really important. Like everything stems together, and it just comes back to again, like when we are talking to our clients, or when I'm speaking to my clients, I try and make it that emotional journey, but I try and give my own personal experience with it too, because again, like I said before, I've seen firsthand of what waiting looks like and what impact that can have. And I've also seen the impact of not being able to afford exactly where I can live.
Mm.
And, that sacrifice versus reward, or like the podcast I listened to recently, if you want to add something to your life, you have to be willing to subtract something too.
Mm.
And if that subtraction means, less partying so I can save an extra $200 a week, or if that means I have to go out an hour away from the city just to be able to afford to get into the market, I'll do it. But even the mortgage repayments, at the end of the day, it's going to be your repayments.
Mm.
You're going to find a way to make a sacrifice to make sure that's being paid off.
Yeah.
Because once you're in your home, you don't want anyone taking it from you. You're going to do everything in your power to keep that.
It's funny the number of people that say that exact words, which is you find a way. So it seems scary, but you find a way. So many people that I've had on the potty have said that. All right, so we're starting to get to wrapping this up. So if you had one piece of advice for someone looking to get into their home, what would you say to them?
One piece of advice would be, don't wait. It's best to get in sooner rather than later and figure it out along the way when you're in your own home, rather than waiting to get into your own home and then never get into the finish line.
If you were to tell people one thing that they should be wary of or avoid, what would it be?
One thing, don't rely so heavily on a pre-approval letter.
Mm-hmm. What's that?
Because I think naturally where people are naturally educated is, if you want to buy a property, go get yourself a pre-approval, and then you can buy yourself a house. The pre-approval letter is essentially just the bank saying, we could potentially lend you this much money. But then they've got no further information on what you're looking for, what you're actually buying. So there's too many hurdles that need to be jumped and too many things that can potentially go wrong, where the bank can then turn around and say, we said we were going to give you $750, but we might actually just give you $650.
Yeah. I think the other thing there too is a lot of people, when they think they're like, oh, I want to buy a house. So they're like, I need a pre-approval. And then they go to their bank to get it. But what they don't realize is A, you're dealing with one bank's lending policies, but B, you're also dealing with just one dude at the bank or person at the bank who may not be particularly good at their job. I think the power of brokers and being able to look at, 30, 40 different lenders, understand your situation, and then coming up with something tailored to you is very important. Probably the final question that I would ask you is, what is the biggest upside of owning your own place?
The biggest upside is you can make decisions on whatever you want in that house. You can put a picture frame up, you can paint the walls, you'll put more effort into doing a garden, you'll have more freedom, and you'll take more care in knowing that it's your own home.
Yeah, the pride of ownership.
Yeah.
Love it. Mario, thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been amazing.